welcome to another edition of Long Beach Treasures. I'm your host, Harvey Keller. Today we're at the historic Rancho Los Alamitos, and we're going to be looking at their historic gardens. What a beautiful, beautiful place this is. So come with me, and we're going to start in here in the secret garden. And joining me in here is landscape designer Barbara Paul, who knows all about the gardens here at the Rancho. Hi, Barbara.
Good day. Happy to see everyone.
Now tell us a little bit about the secret garden.
This is a wonderful little space that really is very indicative of the indoor-outdoor living style in Southern California. This is very much a room of the house, even though it's outside.
And the architects were?
This was the Olmsted brothers, and the Olmsted brothers, their father was actually the premier landscape architect in the United States. He designed Central Park in New York.
Aha. Anything else?
The Boston Common, the whole Boston Green Necklace, and the reason the Olmsted brothers, his sons, were out here working is they were laying out the city of Palos Verdes.
Oh, and so Florence Bixby is the one that hired them to do her gardens?
Exactly.
So this was a place where she could play with her grandchildren and have a few moments of peace and sit, relax with a cup of tea and just enjoy the scenery.
Indeed.
Let's go on out and look at some of the other gardens.
All right.
Now, Barbara, this is called the South Garden?
This is the South Garden, yes, and this is the old ranch house behind us here.
Beautiful bougainvillea.
Isn't it wonderful? And the trees,
We'll
aren't
talk
they magnificent?
we'll talk about those in just a minute. They are indeed magnificent. Okay, now this is called the Geranium Walk.
It is, and it's called that because of these wonderful geraniums along the side here.
At one time, wasn't this the children's play area?
It was, as a matter of fact. This is where the children kept their donkey carts and their rabbits and pens and all that sort of thing. And then when they grew up, it wasn't needed anymore, and Florence Bixby turned it into this wonderful geranium
Now,
walk.
I think this had a different architect, did it not?
It did.
And it was?
This was Florence Yock, and Florence Yock was well known for doing historical sites, and she also did Hollywood sets. She designed all the sets for Gone with the Wind.
Wow, so she has some great credentials too.
Indeed. And this is probably the closest thing we have to a historic mission-style garden here at the ranch. And originally, you used to be able to sit here and look out to the ocean.
Oh, the gardens here are just phenomenal. And this little gazebo here.
This would have been a wonderful place to get out of the sun on a hot sunny
And
day.
I understand you could sit here and have a cup of tea in the morning or a martini in the evening, and you could look to the south, and the vistas would be the shimmering Pacific Ocean with Catalina in the background.
It would, it would. We have olive trees down here now. As society became encroaching on the hillside, Florence Bixby then had these olive trees put down at the end to change the vista.
Isn't it ironic the vista changed because of the discovery of oil, and the revenue from the oil allowed Florence to change her vistas?
It's absolutely true. If it weren't for the oil, she wouldn't have needed to, and if it weren't for the oil, she wouldn't have had the resources to do it.
And this is the Rose Garden.
This is the Rose Garden, also designed by the Olmsted brothers.
Oh, I see we have some guests having lunch. Thank you for joining us at the Rancho.
The roses here in this garden, Harvey, are not typical roses that you would find today if you were out shopping for roses.
How come?
We have used roses that were typically used in about the early 1900s, around 1920, because that's the way it was done. This is a historic garden, and we have tried to replicate what originally was here.
Are these bushes a little closer than you would normally plant?
A whole lot closer. You wouldn't do this in your normal garden, but the reason we've done it is we continue to perpetuate the mistakes of the original gardener, Florence Bixby.
And I see here we have the replica of the old timepiece that Florence used to tell time.
Yes, it's a sundial, and unfortunately it doesn't recognize daylight savings time. The sundial is accurate about 4 times a year.
And I know one of those is Christmas Day.
One of those is Christmas Day. And one is April, I think it's the 16th, June, somewhere around the 14th, and September the 14th.
And it can be anywhere from 16 minutes slow to 14 minute fast.
It can.
And I believe it's set to the longitude and latitude of the Rancho?
It is. And this is a replica of the original piece that deteriorated. And I see from my watch it says that it's a little after 1, and sure enough it is.
Hey, maybe this is one of those magic days.
That's right. That's right.
And this down here is called the patio?
It is. And it was added on to the end of the rose garden here by the Olmsted brothers as a place where you could come down here now and look back to the fabulous view that was created if you look back into the yard.
This is an unusual design using the small river rocks to give this a different texture, a different feel, a different look.
It is. And I understand it is indicative of Moorish styles that may have been used at the Alhambra, for instance, in Spain, and it's fairly typical of the Spanish look that we have here today.
Now, Florence looked upon these gardens as an extension of the house. These were rooms to be lived in. These were to be where you could entertain, where you could relax and just enjoy.
Indeed. Very much a part of the house.
And they're so relaxing. You know, if you wouldn't hear an airplane go over periodically, you'd swear you're in a different time era altogether.
It's absolutely true. In fact, a lot of people from outside the Rancho don't realize we're here, and when we're here, it feels like we're in the country, and you wouldn't know that there's a big city all around us here.
And we're going to go next, I think, through the Oleander Walk.
Okay, let's do that.
I know that at this time there is a blight that's hitting the oleanders.
Sad, yes, unfortunately. So our historic oleanders are rather sick right now, but nevertheless, the structure of the Oleander Walk with that beautiful vista down at the end is still very much with us.
The canopy of the oleanders, the brick walkway, the lush English ivy on both sides, blue plumbago, I believe, is that correct?
It is. It's Cape Plumbago from South Africa.
And, you know, the umbrella that this creates is just really magnificent. I understand there's not a whole lot of pesticides used here at the Rancho. Is that true?
That's absolutely true. In fact, in the rose garden, our chief horticulturalist was telling me just yesterday he has hardly used any pesticides on those roses all year. The beds are cleaned up, the roses are cut back, and the ground is mulched. And we water appropriately here. We don't overwater like a lot of us tend to do in our suburban homes.
It's by need rather than schedule, correct?
Exactly so. These oleanders, for instance, really are very drought-tolerant plants, and so is the ivy, so we don't do a lot of watering in here.
So with no pesticides, this is not only a respite for humans, but for God's little creatures, the animals, the butterflies, and beautiful, beautiful area.
And we have a lot of all of those things here.
Now I see these look like Italian cypress.
They are. And this is a very different textural space to the one we were just in. There's a wonderful view up to the geranium walk and up to the house there.
So the steps just lead up to the geranium walk?
They do. And these little steps here lead into our cutting garden. And we think this may be one of the reasons that the cypress are here is to screen off that view, because it's a cutting garden. It's not always pretty. Shall we walk over there?
Absolutely. Okay, now this is going to be the cutting garden.
It is. This is the cutting garden. This is a place, Harvey, where we grow plants that we do use in the ranch house as decoration, just like Florence Bixby used to do way back many years ago.
So it has a practical purpose as well as a beautiful purpose.
A beautiful purpose. It's not very beautiful right now, unfortunately, but it's a cutting garden, and that's the very nature of it. It's winter now, so the garden is not as beautiful, perhaps, as it usually is.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but are there not almost all of the growing season represented from baking full sun almost to full shade over here where the calla lilies are? Those aren't calla lilies.
They are calla
lilies. They are
lilies.
calla lilies, aren't they?
Indeed. It's a wonderful place to grow things. We can grow things from almost all around the world, except if they need a cold winter, because we can't supply them with that. But those calla lilies are actually swamp plants from South Africa, so they like it in the shade.
Now, is this a hot tub?
No, it's not. We have a lot of guesses as to what it is. Some people say a barbecue. It's actually a cistern. And what Florence used to do, or her helpers used to do, is fill this with water from the garden hose when they were cutting plants to make arrangements. They would cut the plants and put them here in the water, and then they would keep them wet until they made the arrangements. And inside here, I don't know if you can see this, but inside here is a thing that holds the flowers together, and that's called a frog.
So
you hold the flowers up out of the water.
There's a frog in the well.
There's a frog in the well, indeed there is. And there's a valve here, so when you were done with it, you open this up and let the water run out, and it would water the garden. So it's very functional indeed.
Well, let's continue
this
on
way?
up this way. Now,
You watch your step here.
okay, look at the beautiful, beautiful poinsettias over here. They're in full bloom.
Aren't they wonderful?
Oh, yes.
Those are actually native to Mexico, not too far from here, and they're just growing wild here.
Now, this would have been the original entrance into the Rancho, and these are the gates that one would go through.
This is the front door.
As they came off 7th Street.
That's right. Where we originally came in was the back door, and this would have been the front door.
So this is where guests would be received, and deliveries and friends probably would go through the back door.
That's right. And isn't this a wonderful front entryway?
Oh, isn't that?
It's a little more grand than mine at home.
You know, it's hard to believe that the ranch house started out as a little 4-room adobe house, and now it has what, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 rooms?
It does indeed. In fact, before it was a little adobe house, this was actually a home of a Native American community, and it's hard to believe looking at this now, but this was basically just a grass hilltop. No trees.
The Tongvas?
The Tongva.
Or weren't they referred to as a Gabrielinos?
Gabrielino or the Tongva.
Now we're heading into what is known as the Friendly Garden, am I correct?
It is. And it's called that, it's a very friendly space, it's called that because this is where Florence Bixby used to garden herself. This is where she would put cuttings of things that her friends would give her. And so the plants that we have growing in here may not be the historic plants, but they're typical of that era.
Is this the Olmsted Brothers?
Yes, this is also the Olmsted Brothers. It's got that very formal shape, but they've softened the corners and made it a more friendly space.
This looks like an hourglass design with a brick walkway and planting areas around the fringes with the little reflecting pond in the middle. Now, I know the figurine there is not historically accurate because I believe there used to be one there by a sculptress by the name of Harriet Frismuth, and it was called Play Day.
Exactly. And this is a very similar type of sculpture that a group of volunteers here at the Rancho had commissioned to replace the original sculpture. It's rather beautiful, isn't it?
It is. I think the original sculpture was a anniversary present from Fred to Florence at her request.
At her request, indeed. Shall we walk way on over there and you'll see a very different garden on the other side?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, I'm sure this would probably be a lot more colorful during the springtime when more flowers are in bloom, but it's so relaxing and beautiful just with the greenery.
It's true. Any time of year it's wonderful, any time. But it's true in the springtime, in the summer, there's a whole lot more in bloom.
And this is called what?
This is called the Jacaranda Walk, and it's called that because of these wonderful jacaranda trees that are growing along here. It also used to have another name, though. It used to be called the Adobe Walk, and the reason for that is the soil we're standing in. This is heavy adobe clay soil, and this is what the original Spanish immigrants used to create the house. They made adobe bricks out of this.
And what a great building material in a land that had little water and fewer trees.
Exactly, exactly. There was a little water down at the bottom of the hill. We had a natural spring, but that's exactly true. It was a little water.
Now, I think this also has some historical designation when the Indians lived here.
Way beyond before the Spanish came, the Native American community used to live on this hilltop, and this was their kitchen midden. This is where they threw their trash after
Which means it was a garbage dump.
That's exactly what it was. And we can see seashells and things in here right now, which is actual tangible evidence of those people that lived here about 3,000 more years ago.
And I think this is one of the gardens that really reflects Florence Bixby because the jacarandas are blue. On this side you have the blue wisteria. You have the blue pots down at the end. All of this represents the blue sky and blue, which was Florence's favorite color.
Her favorite color indeed, and reflect on all of those.
All right, don't go away. We'll be right back with more Long Beach treasures.
Meeting in Long Beach has never been grander. Whether you need space for 10 guests or 1,000, The Grand at Willow Street Center will accommodate them in elegance that meets your high standards. After all, we serve your party one guest at a time. Plan your own function in the comfort of your home by visiting our website at www.thegrand.net. The Grand at Willow Street Center, just off the Lakewood South off-ramp of the 405 freeway. Call today for your free brochure.
I made one phone call, they were out in 2 days. When they came in, my wife said it was great. They came in and basically showed her what they were doing because they redo the computer and they hooked all the boxes up. They were great, clean, efficient, but the channels that you have on, I never knew there were so many different Discovery channels. You have them all. So a lot of people go to the satellite dishes and stuff. You have it all. I mean, Charter Cable has everything that suffices my needs and my family needs. It's very easy to use. That's been great. What makes Paulie's different?
Well, first of all, his coffee is fresh roasted 1,000 miles from Seattle, so we like to have coffee that's fresher and tastes better.
We carry about 70 varieties of coffee. But the thing that I believe makes Paulie's special is the people who work at Paulie's. We're a neighborhood store. We're your family store. We know you, you know us. We'll take care of you.
We were voted the #1 coffee house in Long Beach in the recent Press Telegram poll.
Paulie's Gourmet Coffee. Doesn't get any better than this.
30 years ago, Jacques Cousteau warned us that the ocean was in peril. We dump too much in it and we extract too much from it. Sea otters and other marine mammals are going extinct, and we ought to protect them. Support marine protected areas. Show up at the next series of public comments. Let your voice be heard. Support marine protected areas.
Okay, welcome back. We're now going to go down and see the cactus garden. Now, I think this started out as an experiment.
It did, Harvey. Actually, this was another piece of vacant property out here. And Fred Bixby thought that he might be able to develop some thornless cactus to feed his cattle. And his plant-loving wife, that experiment failed, so his plant-loving wife developed this wonderful garden with the assistance of William Hertrick. Hertrick is pretty well known for having designed and managed the cactus garden at the Huntington Botanical Garden.
Now, you said he wanted to have this as a source of water for his animals.
Cattle feed.
Yeah, these were on his ranches in Arizona, right?
On his ranches in Arizona, and he also had cattle coming here, too.
Now, this is a prickly pear.
It is.
And this, I understand, the tongva, there was a delicacy for him?
The tongva and also the Mexican community as well. In fact, it's still used by a lot of people in the area. These little red, these are the seed pods that come after the blooms, and these are called las tunas, and they're usually made into sweet things like jams and jellies.
Now, I noticed you touched that. Isn't your fingers full of small little
I know
stickers?
I know where to touch it. I touched it between those things. Don't try this at home.
I know.
And this down here, this is nopales or nopalitos. It's cut, chopped, and sautéed, and also used in dishes. Very, very good.
I know the missions used to use these as fences. Some of them grew, what, 20 feet tall, 12 feet wide? And
at least.
with the prickly pear there and the stickers, it was a great barricade for not only man, but animals also.
It's true. In fact, this plant over here, which is an agave, is just as good, if not better, a barricade. You would not walk through that plant.
Speaking of agaves, I want to point out this one here because it's close and it's easy to get to. If you notice here at the tip, if I'm not mistaken, the Indians used to use these as needles, did they not?
They could, and also there's a fiber that goes continuously through, and it could draw the thread right through with it, so they could sew things together.
So this was the early Singer sewing machine?
It was. It was. There's
And
also another interesting use for that.
I know it.
You do?
Tequila.
All right. That's right. Agave, that's what agave is used for making.
All right, I think there's another little area down here that is a garden within a garden.
Oh, you want to see the shell garden?
I do.
Follow me. I'll show you. Okay.
All right, this is a compact little area. And this, I think, Florence designed so that she could show her abalone shells and Unfortunately, I think these were Pismo clamshells, which have been, over the years, broken off.
Yes, this whole little area is called a shell garden, and you'll notice the wonderful abalone shells all the way around the outside. This little bench is also in the shape of a shell, and if you look from up above, this whole garden is in the shape of a shell.
Oh, it is, isn't
Isn't
it?
that wonderful?
And I think these shells came from their ranch out there by Point Conception, their coho.
That's right, the Coho Ranch, which is still owned by the Bixby family, at least
Oh,
part
is
of
it?
it is. It is.
Oh.
But it
You
was
know-
in memory of her son.
This is just such typical of the gardens here. There's a nice little bench where you can come, sit, relax, read, get a whole new perspective on life. It just rejuvenates one.
It does, it certainly does.
And so let's go look at, I think, what is called the old garden, or no, we're going to the native garden.
The native garden is right next here, but I think we'll go around that way. It is under renovation
Right.
right now. We're restoring the native garden.
All right.
But let's go this way.
Now this is under restoration, and completion date, any idea?
Oh, we're not sure, but soon you can look forward to it. We are currently excavating all of these ponds that we didn't even know were here.
Now I understand that this was basically created because Mrs. Bixby was afraid of horses, never did learn to ride, and she never went out riding with Fred and the daughters, and so when they would go out and come back and tell her all the great things they saw in the wild country, she created this so that she could see what they saw.
That sounds, well, like what could have happened. She lived here on this ranch with all these horses, and apparently she never did learn to ride. The interesting thing about this garden, well, there are many interesting things, but this is a native garden, and these are mostly native California species. Not 100%, but pretty much. And back in the 1920s, not many people were interested in native California species.
You know, I notice also a lot of statuary plaques that have a religious connotation, and I've never heard anything about the Bixbys being unduly religious or Catholic. Would this, you think, because so much of these symbols seem to deal with Catholicism, if this might be because of their Hispanic ranch hands?
I think it may well have been, and I understand that the ranch hands who did help in the construction here were free to come and roam around some of the gardens on Sunday when it was their day off, and a lot of these would be also typical of the Spanish mission period, a history that she also was interested in following.
Okay, you pointed out earlier the trees.
The tree. Do you want to go see the trees?
I do.
Okay.
Now these two giant Morton Bay fig trees probably must have been Susan Bixby's most dramatic statement here at the Rancho, would you say?
I would certainly agree with that, Harvey. They were planted probably about 100 years ago, and these trees will get bigger. They're not fully grown yet.
Wow, and they're related to what?
They're Ficus macrophylla. They're related to the banyan tree. They're related to that little ficus tree you might have in your living room, and to edible figs as well.
And this would be very typical of Victorian gardens during the turn of the century?
Yes, it would. And don't forget, when these were planted, there wasn't much shade up there here on the hill, and she was trying to create shade. I think she did a good job.
And she evidently didn't realize how big they were going to get, because if you notice, she planted a palm tree in front of each fig tree, and they're growing right up through the branches.
It's true. In fact, they're even bending over that way a little bit to get the light.
Boy, a plumber's delight.
Could be.
Let's go see the old garden, the last
Okay.
garden. Okay, this is the music room patio, which leads down to the old garden.
The old garden, yes. And it's called that because it's the area under cultivation for the longest length of time. Isn't this a wonderful fountain down here?
Oh yes, and the texture with the different colors and the different trees. No flowers, but just the texture of the colors and trees are just really striking.
Mostly green, yes. The bananas are beautiful, and the big giant timber bamboo back there.
And this is where it all started.
This is the place the garden started. This is the first shade tree, we believe, on this property. And it was a California pepper tree. And we believe it was planted by Abel Stearns, who owned this property way back in the early, mid-1800s.
1841 to 1856.
Indeed.
1865.
You know your history. So we believe he planted this tree. It was planted during his period of time. And looking around us now, it's hard to believe this would have been the very first shade tree on this hilltop.
Can you believe that tree was planted before the Civil War?
It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Unbelievable.
This wasn't even the United States then.
And this is where they used to entertain with the benches, and I've seen pictures with serapes over the arms and aguaves in pots, and just a beautiful place to entertain.
Unfortunately, the tree met its demise probably from old age.
And it will be replanted?
It will be replaced with a tree that we've already selected that looks like this tree.
Oh, good. Gosh, this is just such a beautiful, beautiful place.
Glad you're enjoying it. We love it here.
I have one more thing that I have to go see, and that's Big John.
Big John, come on this way.
Okay. You know, if I ever had a really bad day, I think to lift my spirits, I would just grab a good book, a sandwich, come up and sit in the gardens and just relax and be reborn.
It would be a good place to do that. And here's a fellow who would make you feel even happier just visiting with
Big
him.
John. Big John here weighs in about 2,000 pounds. He's a Belgian draft horse, and he is about 24 years old. And he's sort of symbolizes life here at the ranch. He's a beautiful old horse. I love Big John.
We all do.
He has a partner, Penny. I guess she's probably back in the stall there somewhere.
I haven't seen Penny today. She's probably over there, yes.
Okay.
But
Barbara, I want to thank you so much for touring with me here at the Rancho today. I've enjoyed it. I'm sure our viewers will. And it's just such a remarkable place. I can't believe there are so many people in Long Beach who don't know that the Rancho is here.
there are. In fact, I didn't know myself until I came here with a plant class one time many years ago. I love the place, and please come on back.
Oh, I encourage everybody to come on up and see this really, truly remarkable historical place. And don't forget, the Rancho is open Wednesday through Sundays from 1 to 5 p.m. You can come up and roam through the gardens by yourself and on your own, but a tour of the house and the barnyard area, you have to have a docent. So please come up and see what a beautiful historic site we have here at Rancho Los Alamitos. I don't often have time to thank you for all the nice things you say to me and all of the response I get from you. I'm glad so many of the viewers enjoy Long Beach Treasures, because certainly I enjoy bringing it to you. So this is Harvey Keller signing off, and come back again next month and we'll uncover more Long Beach Treasures.